Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Alright guys, we're Boruto chapter 7 predict. The first thing that we have to talk about obviously has to be Mitsuki versus Boruto. Now this right here is going to be interesting for multiple different reasons. I think one of the first one and obvious one is going to be exactly how strong is Boruto, and especially how strong is Mitsuki compared to Boruto. One of the things that we haven't seen from Boruto over the past 6 chapters is a bunch of brand new techniques, a bunch of brand new abilities, and we've seen the Utsuhiko, we've seen the Flying Raijin. Now in that, there's multiple things from Boruto that we know that he has, but that we just haven't necessarily seen yet. For example, the Karma Seal. Now, do I expect to see the Karma Seal next chapter? No. The reason why I don't necessarily expect to see the Karma Seal next chapter, because I don't necessarily think that Mitsuki is going to push Boruto to where he needs to be forced to use the Karma Seal. That kind of gives an idea, or kind of gives a glimpse to what I think the outcome is probably going to be. But before we get to that, one of the other things that we do have to look forward to has to be the plot with Mitsuki. Mitsuki and Boruto have always had this relationship to where Mitsuki calls Boruto his son. This right here is going to be very important. It's always been talked about how Mitsuki has to make a specific choice about who his son actually is, and it looks like this right here could possibly be in the next chapter, in chapter 7. If you guys recall, going back to chapter 1, they made it seem like Mitsuki wasn't totally buying into the fact that Kawaki may have actually been his son. The Mitsuki and Kawaki scene essentially ended with Kawaki having to go off on a mission, which was when Boruto and Code actually did show up. And then right before Kawaki left, Kawaki said, "Quit following me around, it's annoying." And then Kawaki says, "I want to protect you." And then Mitsuki says, "But you're..." And then Kawaki storms off. Mitsuki didn't necessarily get to finish his actual sentence, but after Kawaki left, Mitsuki finished his sentence. He says, "You're the sun shining bright upon my moon, aren't you, Kawaki?" And he said it more of a question. And I think this right here is going to continue on in chapter 7. One of the things that we have been seeing in Boruto so far is the fact that physical evidence or actual proof, it doesn't necessarily change. So I'm guessing multiple things that Mitsuki may be sensing from Kawaki could be similar to those of Kawaki, the original Kawaki that Mitsuki knows and loves, and not actually his son, which means that once Mitsuki actually does come in contact with Boruto, there could be multiple things surrounding that does actually lead Mitsuki to believe that Boruto is his actual son, and that right there in itself could lead Mitsuki to go against omnipotence and join the team of Boruto. So I think this next chapter could definitely be substantive for many different reasons. Of course, Boruto versus Mitsuki is going to be an absolute smoke show. A lot of people definitely want to see that, but I think the plot stuff surrounding Boruto and Mitsuki is going to be something that we should be looking forward to. And if I were to give an actual prediction, I definitely believe that the sun and the moon stuff is definitely going to come up in chapter 7. Now, when it comes to the fighting situation, I think that Mitsuki is going to surprise a lot of people. But just because Mitsuki is going to surprise a lot of people, I do not think that Mitsuki is actually going to win. I think there's some things that we do have to figure out about Mitsuki's Sage Mode. I definitely do believe, because it does look so different from a lot of the other Sage Modes that we do actually get to see, it's likely that Mitsuki's Sage Mode is going to be extremely stronger. Now, this is just my personal opinion or my prediction for this video, but going off of the things that we have been seeing, I mean, it just kind of makes sense. One of the things that we've always kind of known is the fact that Mitsuki's body has been one of the most durable bodies in the entirety of the series, and one of the only things that could actually damage it, and one of the things that was already confirmed to be like a thing that Mitsuki's body can't actually handle, was the Sage Mode, which essentially means that the power that the Sage Mode did actually wield was for a body significantly stronger than the body that Mitsuki did actually have. And if you guys recall, Mitsuki has consistently been one of the strongest new generation characters throughout the series. So again, that technique in itself has to be extremely powerful for even getting Mitsuki to not be able to wield it. But again, in the fight versus Boruto, Boruto is going to make even the elites look absolutely fodder. He made Code, which was complete unlimited, along with the Karma Seal. He made him look complete fodder. He literally couldn't touch him. So I'm gonna still go with Boruto minus 1,000 on my parlay. But like, do I think it's gonna be close? I won't say close, but I think Mitsuki's gonna surprise a lot of people and kind of show people that, hey, he's actually a threat. Now, one of the other things that I kind of did find a bit interesting, specifically with the Kawaki and Mitsuki dynamic, is the fact that one of the last things that Kawaki did actually say to Mitsuki right before he did question his sun and moon dynamic was Kawaki essentially telling Mitsuki that he needed to leave. This right here is essentially what happened in the last chapter, chapter 6, right before Mitsuki put him out. If you guys recall, Kawaki and Mitsuki were kind of arguing about specifically why he was following Kawaki around. At this particular time, Mitsuki didn't necessarily rationalize it with the fact that he says Kawaki is his son. He just said, hey, it's a mission, just take it up with the Hokage. And because this right here was the exact same conversation that happened the first time that Mitsuki kind of questioned the sun and the moon dynamic, and now it's happening right before Mitsuki actually confronts his actual son, I just think it lines up almost too perfectly. This right here is probably going to come up in the next chapter. Now, the next thing I definitely do want to talk about has to be Shikamaru and Boruto's relationship, because I think plot-wise, this right here may actually be the biggest. Boruto is probably going to be the most important character in the entirety of the series, and of course his relationship with the Hidden Leaf Village is probably going to be one of the most important relationships that he holds throughout the entirety of the series. And Shikamaru and Boruto kind of starting to mend fences in chapter 7, that's absolutely huge. I personally believe that Shikamaru isn't necessarily completely bought into the idea that Boruto is Kawaki and Kawaki is Boruto. I think as of right now, Shikamaru is just trying to gather as much information as possible so he could then come up with a good conclusion. But as of right now, he's really just trying to gather up as much information as possible. But one of the things that I do believe is going to be in the best interest of Shikamaru is actually working alongside Boruto. And we've already kind of seen a willingness for Boruto to kind of cooperate with other people. The current threat right now is going to be the Shinju. The Shinju are going to be the biggest. It's going to be the threat. It's going to be the enemy of Boruto, the enemy of Code, the enemy of Shikamaru, and the enemy of Kawaki. One of the things that Boruto has already shown us, he's willing to collaborate with other enemies to actually take down the threat of the Shinju and potentially free Sasuke. If you guys do recall, back in I believe chapter 2 or either chapter 2 or chapter 3, Boruto literally released the Usuhiko from Code so he can actually help him against the Shinju. So if a character like Shikamaru does ask to actually aid the Hidden Leaf Village in fighting against the Shinju, I think that's going to be something that Boruto definitely doesn't want to do. Now, there is a possibility that he declined. The reason why I believe that it's possible that he declines is because he doesn't want to snitch on Kawaki. He wants to stand 10 toes down. If you guys recall, in the last chapter, he basically talked about people he wants to save. At the end, he basically held himself back from saying a name, and the one name that was actually missing from that little monologue, or names that was actually missing from that little monologue, was Naruto and Hinata. And at this particular point, not everyone knows that Naruto and Hinata aren't actually dead. And I'm guessing for Boruto to potentially protect Kawaki standing in the Hidden Leaf Village, which is still kind of his brother in a way, he doesn't necessarily want to tell or like expose the fact that Naruto isn't actually dead, because like kind of exposes what Kawaki told everybody, that Boruto himself killed Kawaki. So I'm guessing it could be a situation where Boruto doesn't want to fully turn on Kawaki, but I don't know if Kawaki is going to extend that same courtesy to him. But regardless, I definitely do believe that at this particular time, all signs point to the fact that Boruto would be willing to work with the Hidden Leaf Village, would be willing to take down the Shinju. But if he doesn't, it's probably going to be because of Kawaki. Now, do I believe that Shikamaru is probably going to ask for that assistance in the next chapter? I'm not entirely sure, simply because I think that this right here is just going to be more of an informational thing. Now, speaking of the Shinju, we're probably going to get to see the Shinju in the next chapter, and I think this right here is also going to be very entertaining as well, simply because we want to find out exactly what's going down first, who's fighting who's going where, like what's the situation. There's even a possibility that the Shinju actually do interrupt the Mitsuki and Boruto battle. So it was kind of interesting that we didn't necessarily get to see them in the last chapter. I believe that they show up in this particular chapter right here. And to be honest, in extension with the Shinju, I haven't talked about Kashin Koji. We haven't necessarily talked about Kashin Koji yet, and I actually may make a standalone video about Kashin Koji, because I believe that his character is probably going to be one of the more entertaining ones in this particular series, simply because it relates so much to Jiraiya. And of course, every time we see Kashin Koji, we always think about Jiraiya. But regardless, I think Kashin Koji is going to be tethered to the actual plot of the series. He's not necessarily going to be boxing with too much people, in my personal opinion, because he was introduced alongside Boruto and alongside Sasuke talking about the Shinju. I think he's going to be tied heavily to that plot right there and not necessarily to the battle stuff. So whenever we see the Shinju, I think that's when antennas should be popping up. Kashin Koji, one of the things that he was absolutely spectacular at was his covert missions. He was basically named as an assassin. If you guys recall, he snuck him on Victor right after their meeting. So like, there's a bunch of stuff that I believe that Kashin Koji could be helpful in, and I believe that gathering information, doing a bunch of covert missions, potentially even spying on some of the Shinju, I think that right there is definitely going to come into handy, and that right there should be the thing that we should be expecting Kashin Koji to actually do. Now, also, we do have to figure out where the Jura come from. We pretty much already know all the other Shinju and where they come from. Bug comes from Bug, Hidari comes from Sasuke, Matsuyu comes from Moegi. The only one that we don't really know has to be Jura. There's a lot of speculation that it might be Kawaki, it might be Ishiki, it might even be Jigen, but at this particular time in chapter 7, we have to anticipate some sort of information being given about Jura. It may not be his actual clone or the Shinju or the original Shinju or whatever you guys want to call it, But I do want to figure out some sort of backstory with Jura that gives us more information about who he actually is. But let me know what you guys think. It's been your boy Barbie, and we out.
It's a knife.